obviously you're going to get much less consistent dampen. There you go.
Christ.
You're going to get less consistent dampen, but the air is obviously going to heat up as well and expand.
Hello, welcome to my GSX-R750 rebuild project. For those of you that have seen my previous 7 videos, you'll know that last year I bought a 2014 GSX-R750. It was crash damaged, and me and my friend Bob, mainly Bob, got it from a crash damaged state to an absolute minter. And last year it was all about getting it as standard looking as possible and working 100%, which is exactly what we did. This year's target is just to make it as good as it can be within the realms of keeping it standard. So I've had it remapped by BSD, and you would have seen that fantastic video with Andy, hopefully, on the last time out. It's got an end can in it, but it's still got the cat and everything, so it still makes the same power as a road bike, really, or the standard road bike, but it's a lot smoother, and I can talk more about that in a little road test video that I've got coming up on this bike. So now I'm going to turn my attention to the suspension. Now, it's currently bog standard, and it's set up exactly the same as the launch bikes when I went to the GSX-R750 L1 launch, which is basically the same as my bike. They never changed after 2011, apart from colours. So I've got those settings in there that they used at Monte Blanco circuit, including a 5mm spacer that went in the rear shock to jack it up, to put it on its nose to make it steer faster, which kind of was the thing to do back then. But having ridden it all through last year, it does feel a little bit too on its nose, especially as I've been used to, you know, riding more modern race bikes on my own race bike, which is actually high at the front and low at the back. So what I want from my 750, I mean, the suspension is pretty good anyway, but I want it to be really plush. I want a really kind of controlled ride. I want to be able to do the odd track day. I'm not looking for a race setup or to throw expensive suspension at it, like a racing shock or a racing cartridge kit. Instead, I want to see if I can get the standard suspension as absolutely good as I can get. So I took it to Darren at MCT Suspension. He's near Stowmarket in the east of England. And I've seen his stickers on race bikes in race paddocks for years and years and years. And I've heard lots of very good things about him from racers and fellow journalists who've taken long-term test bikes there, their own bikes there, to have the suspension tweaked. He knows how to set up a race bike. He also knows how to make suspension a lot better. He's also a successful racer in his own right. He's raced 400s, he's raced 600s in the British Championship. So he knows his onions. And I spent a day with him recently, and at the end of the day I got this little data card with all my new suspension settings in it. Everything from oil levels, spring weights, sag settings, and everything in between. Darren stripped, rebuilt, revalved and resprung my standard suspension units, which I didn't really even know was a thing. And that little lot cost about £475, which is way cheaper than an aftermarket shock or fork cartridge kit would ever be. Loads cheaper. And here's how we did it.
Well, what we're going to do first of all is get an idea of how good the bike is in standard trim. We're going to look at the good aspects of it. We're going to look at the bad aspects. So when we're looking at the things to improve, we don't want to make the good things worse. So we're going to run through the settings. So what I'm going to do at the moment is I'm going to run through all the settings. So I'm going to go from full hard on the compression to full soft. Yeah. Same on the rebound, front and rear. Just have a look at the sag figures and that sort of stuff on at the moment, so we get a good idea of what needs improving. Yeah. So I've on inspection on the rear shock, with the compression done all the way up, still feels quite plush. So I think we can probably go a little bit further on the compression and just stiffen that ever so slightly. Yeah. But the rebound, with it all the way undone, is about right. So to get that into the middle of the adjustment, we need to look at the rebound. So we're going to probably go with less rebound dampen in general, slightly more compression. Then that should get much better traction. So over bumps and things like that, you should get better resistance on it, coping with the bumps, but bump recovery is probably is what's going to make it better. So speeding the rebound up a little bit, getting it to keep the tyre on the ground over bumps, also stop it crashing. So when you go over a bump, the shock recovers ready for the next one. It doesn't leave the ground and crash into the face of the next one, giving you that horrible jerky feeling and lack of grip, because as soon as it hits, the tyre's just doing that all the time. So what we're going to try and do on the shock is give it maximum control, but maximum stability. So that the sort of air at spring rate, to be honest with you, is fine. So on the front forks, we just want to look at the bleed a little bit on the big piston fork, measure the spring rate, better oil. Probably the biggest difference on the rear shock's going to be oil. We'll probably just tip foam out. So there's a lot of performance gain just by servicing the shock. If you service it, put the right gas pressure in, the bladder in the right place, that sort of stuff pressure-wise, then you'll see an improvement without even revalving and stuff. So the revalving will be like the icing on the cake, but the bike in general, to be honest, feels good. And that is one of those ones where you got to be careful. You got to improve the bad bits, but it has so many good aspects, you don't want to lose them. So it's going to be fine fettling. You don't need to spend a fortune on it. So we'll get to work and see, where we can find the improvements.
So it's quite interesting. So you can take standard suspension apart to improve it. It's not like a sealed unit. No,
probably 95% or more of suspension. Well, all suspension can be rebuilt. Some is not economically viable. So some where there's a peening process or a weld on the shock, the machining costs outweigh buying another shock, and that's probably a shit shock to start with. So on these, pretty much all modern day shocks can be serviced. If they can be serviced, they can be revalved, put oil in, and you can manipulate the sort of settings to get massive improvements. We did a shock for a guy with a GSX-R750 who raced. At the time, he couldn't afford a stock shock. We did that shock. He loved it. He then phoned us up. He bought an aftermarket shock from a reputable company, and he preferred his standard shock. So he actually sold the race shock and kept on his stock shock.
You don't need to throw racing parts at...
No, it is...
Unless you're really going to race seriously.
Yeah, it's benefit and budget. It's how good you want it and how much do you want to spend. On a £3,000 bike, you don't really want to be spending £2,000 on the suspension. No. If you've got it, great. My R1, I think the retail on the suspension that I had on my R1 last year was £17,000. And I can get stuff pretty good. So if I spent that sort of money on that suspension, it will show you the benefits. But on a bike like this, you don't need to throw loads of parts at it. And once it's done, this service is bespoke. So you're looking, like we had a chat about what you wanted with your riding comfort, that sort of stuff, whether you want to ride it further or you want to just go out flat out for 20 minutes. This gives us an opportunity to bespoke build, whereas most shocks are not bespoke built. They are just, so if you buy say a K-Tech shock or an Öhlins shock, Öhlins in particular, if the spring's not right, you have to buy one. If the valving's not right, you have to pay to have it fixed. So bespoking stuff, you're going in straight for what the customer wants. So that's where the benefit comes from.
What about, I've jacked it up, because that was the naughtiest thing to do.
Yes,
But not necessarily now.
No, I don't. I'm not keen on jacking bikes up at the rear. Modern tyres now don't need it. What you're doing when you're jacking it up is you're decreasing your rear grip. You're increasing your braking distances because you lose that rear end traction. So the bike doesn't stop as well and it doesn't go as well, which nowadays, the tyres are so good, that's pretty much how your riding style is. Some 600s and 400s below have to run loads of corner speed. Now these bikes have so much traction that we tend to, if anything, go lower than standard on the rear, not higher. So, and if you go into a race paddock, almost without exception, if you look at the slowest qualifiers, their bikes are like that, tipped on their nose, and you go through qualifying to the fastest guys, and the bikes are like that. So that tells a story. So if you're a decent, quick rider, then probably
pretty flat, or
pretty flat.
with fork extenders.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So a bike like this, the geometry is pretty bloody spot on. So messing with the geometry, particularly if you're going for a bigger tire as well, then you've lost quite a lot of grip.
Cool. Right.
All right.
To work.
Right.
First job is to jack the 750 up on an ABBA stand, take the load off the rear shock to take it out, and remove the spring.
So there's your shock. We've run through the adjusters. Just going to give it a clean up, and then we'll split it apart, have a look. And the reason we run through the adjustment as we do is there should be a lot of correlation. When I get it apart, I should see what I thought I felt.
Yeah.
So if you get a shock apart and it doesn't seem that way, then you need to go back and revisit it. But I've got a pretty good idea, as I've obviously done loads of these as well, to be honest, what I'm going to find. The rebound stack will be too stiff. The compression stack will be close, but we'll just look at the bleed as well, because quite a lot of the compression dampener is being lost through the rebound adjuster.
Right.
So I'll have a look at how much bleed it's got. I have got a solution for that if I want to isolate that so that the compression doesn't bleed through the rebound. That would be more so if someone was racing it, or use a track day only fast group, that sort of stuff. For the road, that might cause a little bit of harshness, so I might well just go a different route for that. But
okay,
that's what we're looking at.
Splendid. Now to get the shock nice and clean and remove the stickers. Why are the stickers going?
The sticker is going because that retains heat, and it's a free thing to do, so you don't need the sticker. So anything we can do to get heat out of the shock is a good thing. So we'll just carefully remove the sticker, clean it all up, and it's just a little, it's a free win, although it is very, very small. But anything you can do to make it better is better. Little shocks like this really struggle to get the heat out. That's why, say, in extreme, if you look on Seth's motocross bike, if you look at the gas reservoir on it, it's huge.
Yeah.
That's way beyond what you would need for progression of the air and the pressure. It's to get heat out.
Right.
So and like on this one, it's got the bladder, which is like a condom, really quite thick, almost like an inner tube type material. In Seth's bike, it's so thin you can't believe it doesn't explode. It is like paper, the bladder in it, again, so you can get as much heat out as you can. So anything you can do. Also, I mean, this is just one little thing that doesn't cost anything. The other thing we'll look at is friction on the piston ring, because the piston ring will have loads of friction on it, which will generate loads of heat. So anything we can do to get rid of the heat is a good thing.
That's attention to detail.
That is the whole job. It's all attention to detail.
So, how much grease have we got in there? Bugger all.
No grease at all. If you look at the pin, it's completely bone dry.
Wow.
So,
and would that have escaped through its life or not had any in the first place?
They don't put grease in bearings anymore.
Wow.
I haven't seen grease in a bearing for probably 5 years.
Jeez.
So everything that you take apart, I mean, in one way it's tragic because obviously it'd be better with grease in, but another engineering wise, it's amazing how good a bearing is.
Yeah.
That it can last no grease in it at all. So, but that's we use. This is the only Silk-Line product I like. Pro RG2.
Yeah.
That stuff's amazing. So on motocross bikes and things like that, more than heat, it's really high impact, which for a linkage is perfect. So it doesn't get hot and it doesn't squeeze out. So we only use that grease and linkages more for the impact that it will put up with than the actual temperature.
Funny, isn't it? People say don't jet wash your shocks because the grease will come out, but it hasn't got any grease in the first place.
Might as well just jet wash it and keep it nice and clean. But yeah, it's crazy. I mean, when they're building bikes, what's that? Probably 1 pence worth of grease.
Yeah.
So 1 pence worth of grease on that shock is great, but if the manufacturer can save 1 pence on 5 million shocks, that's why they do it.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money saved. So these ones, the needle rollers will fall out, and that is a ball ache.
Yeah.
So I just push it halfway through one way, grease it, halfway through the other, grease it, and then
to keep
it's all done.
Yeah, keep it all tidy.
You're in a world of pain when those bearings fall out, because you should know better. When they do, you think, I can't believe I've just done that. So that's all done. Then it's got grease in the seal and in the bearing, and it doesn't cost anything.
Happy days. And an example of poor tolerances in standard suspension.
Just on front forks, things like that. I don't know how well you can see that. This has just a washer, sits up against it with a spring to seal it.
Yep.
But if I just show you that, so it's only got a very light spring to shut it off. If I can show you, it's only actually touching the edges.
Oh, yeah.
So it's leaking all through there, and there. And as you, there you go, you can really start to see how deformed that is now.
Yeah.
So on this system, on the this is a compression piston. So on the rebound side, the oil, rather than pass through the actual dampen system, will just leak in and out through there.
Yeah.
So you've lost a lot of control.
Yeah. And what are these forks?
This is just off a KYB. Their VFR 1200, which are the worst forks ever made.
Right.
But this piston is just out of a KYB,
Yeah.
which you can really see now how far I've got to go. So on that job, even if you so it's still not seated, look. So as you keep going down and you start to seal that washer, you're then going to get a much bigger difference in how your rebound adjuster works.
Yeah.
Because with obviously leak, to a certain extent, can be your enemy. If you need obviously controllable leak on your adjusters, but you don't really want it somewhere else where you can't adjust it.
No. Removing the bubbly oil from the rear shock is a big surprise.
So you can see air
Yeah.
starting to form around there. See all the bubbles coming out?
Yeah, yeah.
That's, I mean, this, to be fair, you can see them all. You don't want any bubbles in the air at all, in the oil at all. So any air that is in the oil will cause. So there's absolutely loads of air in there.
White water.
So that's it. So one, obviously you're going to get much less consistent dampen. There you go.
Christ.
You're going to get less consistent dampen, but the air is obviously going to heat up as well and expand.
Is that all air?
Yeah.
It's white.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So, like I said to you earlier,
Wow.
even if all I did was replace the oil, someone like yourself would notice a difference.
Yeah.
It's not a small amount of air; it's a huge amount.
That's still all sparkling, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Now to take the shock apart and more cleaning.
So we've got the new seal in there. Put the washer, the bump rubber back in, which retains it all, and then you've got everything all done there.
Yeah.
The guide bush in there is like brand new. I have
Yeah.
guide bushes in stock, so if one's been worn, I can just press that out, press a new one in.
Yeah.
Once that's done, just make sure nothing in it, and then that's ready to go back on. You're using of all the materials is so small, you just buy the absolute best you can, because when you're talking about that much grease on a shock,
Yeah.
the difference in a crap job and a good job
Yeah,
is
yeah.
less than a penny.
Yeah.
And for me and my customers, that penny doesn't matter. To the manufacturer, it clearly does. But for guys that are working with the shocks all day long, there's absolutely no reason to use anything other than the absolute best parts, materials and lubricants that you can get.
Yeah.
That's just a little bullet there to stop you damaging the seal as it goes over. So that passes over.
Look at that. Now for some re-shimming.
Almost the black magic of it.
Yeah.
If you looked at, say, a a shim, say a 24mm shim, I've got it in 0.1 of a mil thick, 0.15, 0.2, 0.25, 0.3, and you'd imagine, most people would imagine that say a 0.2 is twice as firm as a 0.1. In reality, it's probably nearly 10 times.
Yeah.
So you would need 10 or plus, you know, I'm just talking generally, I could work it out exactly, but you'd need probably in excess of 10 of those to get to 15 or 20.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that's twice as hard as that sort of stuff. So each one, you've got different shim sizes in the outer diameter. So when you're building a stack up, you can look at the stacks and see the shim. So that's a shim stack. You can see that the bigger ones bend on the smaller ones, so it's like a leaf spring.
Yeah.
So you can change how many shims there are. You can change the thickness. You can put bleed shims in, pressure rings. It's infinite what you can do with these. You just the difficult bit is now what it is you actually want.
Yeah, and that comes with years and years of experience.
I love it when customers come in and say, I'd love it if you could just explain to me how suspension works.
Yeah.
In the half an hour they're here.
Yeah.
You think, oh my God.
It's a life's work, isn't it?
So that is the compression stack done. So we've just given that stack a little bit more support. The piston, you've got the compression side here, which is quite a large surface for the shim stack. So they're quite big shims.
Yep.
On the rebound side, a much smaller shim stack. So you've got much smaller shims. That is almost standard industry. Olan's, K-Tech, people like that, most of them stick to that rule. There's some sack shocks on Aprilias and things like that where they've actually reversed the piston. And in those, if you actually reverse the piston back, the thing works 10 times better. So sometimes you just spin the piston round.
With the shock body rebuilt, Darren fills it back up with oil and regasses it.
All the air out of the shock, and it will then pressure fill it with oil. So at the end of that process, it'll be the best oil we can put in it, zero air. So that starts the process off, and that will draw the damper rod in as it vacuums up. Sometimes it might just need a little help in, and then you watch the gauge there vacuum, so that will show you when it's reached maximum vacuum. Once that's done, you then shut the valve off and then pressure fill it with oil. Okay, so there is a bit of scope for manipulation on the gas. So I compress the bladder, see where the gas pressure goes to, and then adjust it to where I want it. Then release it, and then that'll tell me how much the gas pressure is growing by in the shock. So like that, I can see how much that's ramping up. That's absolutely perfect. It's also a good way of knowing that the bladder is in the right condition. Yeah. So if we'd somehow got that compressed a little bit crushed, you'd see a much bigger rise in the gas pressure. Yeah. So that confirms that everything in there is as it should be.
Now we're going to see what spring rate it is from the factory. All springs are slightly different, even if they're marked the same. And the spring is
exactly 100, pretty much.
100.
So
wow,
it's exactly where I thought it needed to be. In an ideal world, want a slightly softer spring in.
I say it's quite hard, isn't it? 100.
Well, it is, yeah. I mean, it's all relative to the ratio of the linkage and the swing arm and stuff like that. So, you know, it is. You know, well, that's 100. You know, some BMWs run 200. Yeah. Things like that. Pan-Europeans, that sort of thing. But yeah, so it's that shock is made to carry two people effectively. Yeah. So a lot of people, I think one of the biggest mistakes in this job is people buy a bike, they're 17 stone, and they think, oh, I'm quite heavy, I'm going to need a stiffer spring. And they don't think of the fact the shock was made for two people. So quite often people buy a spring they totally don't need. Or in our case, quite often we go softer. Yeah. Because a 17 stone rider is far less than two people. Yeah, so, there's still this thing in the industry where people think, if I'm heavy, I need to go stiffer, without even thinking about what they've got. The amount of times you strip a pair of forks apart, it's got a pair of springs in it at 0.95,
Yeah.
and the standard springs rate at 0.95. So standard springs have been taken out, linear standard springs at 0.95 replaced for an aftermarket one
Yeah.
of the same rate. So there's no benefit
that.
to it
Yeah.
at all.
Back goes the spring onto the shock body and in it goes to the bike, but not before we remove the 5mm spacer. And now onto the forks, removing them from the bike, taking off the tops, emptying out the springs and the oil, and removing the scratches from the stanchions.
Just the light scratches, just sort of deglazing them to a certain amount. If they're bad, then I'll put them on the lathe. But you don't really want to be doing that too much. So
No.
if there's just light surface on there, just take that off, and then if ever something happens in the future, you've still got scope, but you don't really want to be putting them in a lathe and polishing them every single time.
No. Now we have to see what weight springs are in the forks, and they're 1 Newton-meter, or tens as we racers sometimes call them. We're going to put softer springs in, 0.9 in one fork leg and 0.95 in the other, to give an overall of 0.925.
Really nice and simple to work on these forks. As far as bleeding and things like that,
Right.
from your level, they could not be. They're probably the easiest fork to work on.
Why is that?
It's so simple. The oil level, you can look, it's just sitting there. There's no damper rod to move out of the way.
Yeah.
You just fill it with oil, bleed the inner and outer tube, and then it's done. And then you just give this a clean and spruce up.
And you said that the damping rates felt okay when the fork.
That damping's good. Yeah, I think it's got the right bleed in that we need, so it's all looking good. I think we could probably just get away with the right spring
Yep.
and the 5-weight oil in there.
Yep.
So we're going to try that first. If we need to revisit it, we will. But I think it's going to be close.
Yep.
These are, they are a good fork. If you were racing it and you needed them stiffer, we would have to revalve them. But for what you're needing, I think that's going to tick the box, and that's going to save a load of money as well.
Yeah, exactly. The final piece of the jigsaw is to rebuild the forks and fit them back in the bike, getting the screws nice and straight to satisfy our OCD, although there's still the small matter of doing the left one. But the fork seals need some attention.
Shield has seen better days.
Well, yeah, we'll get a new pair of those in just to get
That's
those
only
back.
after 4,000, so it just goes to show if you neglect your bike.
Exactly. So what we saw on the other fork was in those cracks will be almost microscopic little pieces of dust and stone that go up and down
Yeah.
and wear grooves in the fork. So if you see that, get them replaced. Even if you don't think the forks need service, keep the dust seals fresh and working to keep the crap out.
The pièce de résistance is to set the suspension up, starting with the static sag on the rear.
Odometer.
The Sagometer.
That's good.
Yeah.
I've never seen one of them before.
What?
That's amazing.
Yeah. So just without touching the seat unit, then obviously you've got movement.
Yeah,
In seat
in the
units.
actual seat.
So try to not lift up by the seat unit and stuff when you're measuring the figures. But like that, you just take it off the ground. Then if you want to, if you just push the on button and then just hold it for a second, it will come on.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What's good about these is you can actually check how much movement, if you've got any movement. So is it moving about a mil?
1 mil.
There you go, 1 mil.
Yeah.
So if you're a purist, you need to take that 1 mil off your sag figure because that's floating the bearing.
Uh-huh.
So on some you might get 5-6 mil of float. Now that makes a big difference to your sag figure, probably 50% difference. So
Yeah.
with these you can monitor it and you can get it exact. So
Oh, that's-
one of the mistakes people make with sag is things like that. I built a bike once. Guy phoned me up and said your sag figures on the bike are miles out.
Yeah.
I was like, right, okay, well, what have you done? I said, so I put them all in, they're miles out, they're nowhere near. And I said, well, is the bike complete? Well, no, it's not complete. I said, well, where's he said, well, the tail's not on it yet, and the exhaust's not on it. I haven't put the oil in. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
So I said, well, can you do all that and then remeasure it? And he
Yeah.
phoned me back and went, oh yeah, spot
That's
on.
I wish I'd have had one of them when I was racing.
I know.
Jesus
I
Christ.
know, it's absolutely brilliant. Also, it's got a little, if you're on your own, it's got a little Bluetooth dash, so you can see the figures while you're sitting on your own bike, sort of thing. So you've got to look down at that.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that shows you where you need to be. Okay.
So that's 10 mils
Yep.
static sag.
10 mil static sag. So where I set the preload was exactly right.
Perfect.
Yeah. So
It's like you've done it before.
It's like I've done it. I've done it a few times. Yeah. Now.
And now for the front.
So if you can imagine, if you had the rebound all the way in, the forks would settle a lot sooner.
Yeah.
If you have it all the way out, they go higher. So when you're setting sag figures, you're just setting the spring. So you want as little resistance on that spring as
Take
possible.
that away. Yeah.
So you just let it settle under its own weight and then take the figures.
We're looking at a static sag figure of 25mm and rider sag of 40mm as a starting point.
28.
It can then be fine-tuned depending on where I'm riding. Darren puts his recommended damping settings and preload settings in the bike and marks everything down on the spec card you saw at the beginning of this video.
So this is a spec card that's going to have all your settings listed down.
Yeah.
And then you've got that at hand all the time. So either for speaking to me for adjustments, or you can try stuff and you know where to go back to.
Yeah. Just on my way back, stopped in the salubrious surroundings of the services on the A14. Already my bike's got a lot more feel, it's a lot plusher. It feels a lot nicer on the brakes because there's more dive through the forks. Now the fork springs are softer, and I can't wait to have a proper ride on it. And it was a real joy to spend all day with Darren today. I learnt a lot. I can see why everyone rates him so highly, and he's a thoroughly nice guy as well. So stay tuned for the next video where I'm going to be putting some new brakes on my 750, discs and pads, and I'm going to be taking it for a proper road test so I can go through exactly how the fueling feels now it's been mapped to BSD, how the suspension feels, how the brakes feel, and just generally why I think this 750 is still one of the best sports bikes money can buy. So thanks very much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos like this coming very soon.